Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into something, well, pretty critical, the shifting dynamics around Taiwan and specifically the air power balance in the Indo-Pacific. It's evolving fast.
Yeah, it really is. And for this, we're looking at a couple of really interesting sources. There's a recent piece from Shipborne Weapons that's a Chinese military magazine. It comes from their Shipbuilding Industry Corp, actually.
Okay.
And we're also looking at comments from Admiral Samuel Paparo, the head of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. He made these remarks during a Senate hearing, and they were reported by the South China Morning Post. So perspectives from, different angles.
Got it. So our mission today really is to unpack what's going on with China's newest aviation tech, like this rumored J-36 jet, and what it means, especially if things heat up over Taiwan. We want you, the listener, to get a clearer sense of these challenges to, well, traditional U.S. air superiority.
And we should also mention the U.S. side of things, the B-21 Raider bomber from Northrop Grumman, and Boeing getting the nod for the F-47, their sixth-gen fighter. It's definitely a two-way street, this development race.
Absolutely. And for those of you preparing for the UPSC exams, this is directly relevant. Understanding these geopolitical shifts, military modernization, regional stability, it's core stuff for mains, maybe even prelims. So let's jump in.
Okay, let's start with China's next-gen fighter. It's being called the J-36, though that's unofficial for now. The Shipborne Weapons article is pretty upfront. Its main job seems to be tackling the American B-21 stealth bomber, particularly within the first island chain.
Right, countering the B-21. And the article lays out some, well, quite potent capabilities for this J-36. It suggests it could maybe block airspace over U.S. bases in Guam temporarily, like for an hour or two.
Yeah, and from a distance of about 1,000 kilometers, which is quite something. It also talks about suppressing air defenses on Guam itself.
So the implication there is pretty significant, isn't it? I mean,
Right.
Could it actually hinder the U.S. Navy and Air Force, stop them projecting power or intervening if China made a move within that first island chain?
That's certainly the picture the article paints. And they're looking at a potential service date around 2030. It also highlights supposed upgrades over their current J-20 fighter.
What kind of upgrades are we talking about?
Things like better all-around stealth, longer range, more advanced avionics, superior supersonic cruise capability, and importantly, a larger internal weapons bay. So not just small improvements, potentially a real leap forward.
Okay, a significant step. But it's not just the Chinese press talking about this changing picture, is it? Admiral Paparo's testimony in the U.S. seems to echo some of these concerns.
Very much so. He was quite open, acknowledging how quickly China's air combat capabilities are advancing.
And didn't he say something quite stark about denying U.S. air superiority?
He did. His words were essentially that China is now in a position to potentially deny the U.S. air superiority within that first island chain. That's a major statement coming from the Indo-PACOM commander.
Wow. And he warned about production rates too, didn't he?
Yes, he mentioned China, outproducing the United States in air, missile, maritime, and space capability and accelerating these. It's a warning about capacity and speed.
So that first island chain, controlling the air there, is just critical. Paparo really stressed that losing that high ground, as he put it, would seriously limit U.S. options, right?
Exactly. And when he was asked point blank if China could deny U.S. air superiority there, his answer was quite telling. I give them high marks in their ability to do that.
High marks. That really shifts the perspective. It sounds like maybe the goal itself is changing from total air superiority to something else.
That's a key point analysts are discussing. The idea of guaranteed air superiority, like owning the skies completely, 2047 might be becoming unrealistic against a peer competitor. So the thinking seems to be shifting towards achieving air supremacy.
Okay, what's the difference there in simple terms?
Well, think of superiority as total dominance. Supremacy is more about gaining control of the air when and where you need it, for a specific operation or period, even if the enemy can still fly. It's more localized, more temporary, but still decisive for a mission.
Right, control for key moments. Which brings us back to the Taiwan scenario mentioned in that Chinese magazine. They seem to think a fight would focus on the airspace about 1,000 kilometers out from the coast.
Precisely. And that's where the reported capabilities of this J-36 really seem to fit in. Its potential ability to deny airspace in that zone, to hit defenses around Guam.
Yeah.
It lines up directly with a strategy aimed at complicating or preventing U.S. intervention over Taiwan.
Makes sense. But the U.S. isn't just sitting back, obviously. It was interesting that the Chinese magazine itself seemed to suggest that even a lot of their current J-20s might struggle against the B-21 alone.
Yeah, that was a notable admission, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And the B-21 Raider, the Northrop Grumman bomber, is seen as the first real sixth-generation bomber, It had its first flight back in November 2023.
And the U.S. Air Force wants a lot of them, right? Like at least 100.
That's the plan. And the shipborne weapons article actually goes into what it thinks the B-21 can do. Pretty impressive stuff.
Like what?
Well, they suggest it could fly over 2,000 kilometers from Guam, then loiters, hang around near that first island chain, 800 to 1,000 kilometers off China, for several hours.
Loitering for hours that close in. What would that allow the U.S. to do?
According to the article, it could potentially control the airspace between Guam and the first island chain. It could launch standoff missiles at targets on land or sea in China.
Okay.
And maybe even create a safer corridor for other U.S. assets, ships, logistics, spy planes, early warning aircraft, even other bombers like the B-52s or B-1s.
That sounds like it would put immense pressure on Chinese defenses.
That's the idea suggested.
Okay.
It could potentially exhaust and drain their air defense network, constantly having to track and react. It might even, the article speculates, force Chinese carrier groups back towards the mainland for air cover.
And we know the B-21 testing is ramping up.
Yes. Reports indicate increased flight testing activity. And besides the bomber, the U.S. is pushing ahead with its own 6th-gen fighter. Boeing got the contract for the F-47 back in March.
So it really is a race, isn't it? Both sides pushing hard on these next-generation platforms.
Absolutely. An intense development cycle in air power for the Indo-Pacific.
It's maybe worth briefly mentioning the Ukraine war here. We've seen how not achieving air superiority early on can really bog down a conflict, make it much longer and harder.
That's a very relevant point. The U.S. in many recent conflicts has relied heavily on getting that air dominance quickly. It gives a massive edge. So if that's now potentially contested in the Indo-Pacific, it really changes the strategic landscape.
So let's try to wrap this up. Key takeaways seem to be China's developing aircraft like the J-36, potentially designed specifically to challenge U.S. power projection, especially around that first island chain.
Right. And the U.S. military leadership, like Admiral Paparo, is acknowledging this challenge quite openly. They're admitting that automatic U.S. air superiority isn't a given anymore in that region.
And both sides are pouring resources into developing these 6th-generation aircraft, the B-21 and F-47 for the U.S., the J-36, and presumably others for China.
Exactly. And all of this has huge implications for stability, for alliances, and obviously for the potential flashpoint of Taiwan. A contested airspace changes everything in terms of military planning.
It leaves you with a pretty sobering thought, doesn't it? With military tech advancing this fast on all sides, how do you actually maintain peace and security long-term in such a vital region like the Indo-Pacific?
It's the crucial question. And remember, the information we've pulled together today comes largely via Eurasian Times, drawing on that shipborne weapons article and Admiral Paparo's public statements. Keeping up with these developments is vital.
Definitely. So if you found this deep dive useful, especially thinking about those UPSC connections we mentioned, please do hit like, subscribe to the channel, and maybe drop a comment. Let us know your thoughts or any questions you have on this really complex and important topic. Thanks for tuning in.